Boston Mayor Michelle Wu advocated a soft-on-crime agenda by pushing to abolish the gang registry and arguing that criminal behavior, such as theft, should not be prosecuted.
U.S. Supreme Court has sided with the National Rifle Association in a...
Once you show hole on the internet, you can't really undo that. The mayor of Boston's insane views on crime just got exposed. Liberals are actually defending the NRA in a fascinating twist, how the national debt is going to hurt you soon, and a TikToker explains why she regrets doing OnlyFans. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my daily series where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and from across our politics from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and sticking around. We don't bite. It's a fun community we're building here. And if you're a returning viewer, don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, and I pick a few comments to respond to in every episode. Now, before we get into our main topics, I want to do a quick update on the UCLA story we covered last week. Basically, we covered an expose that showed UCLA's medical school was insanely woke and openly discriminatory in its DEI practices. Well, the dean of that medical school, Stephen Dubinette, has, according to the reporter who broke that original story, Aaron Sabarium, has spent the last week claiming that UCLA does not discriminate based on race and follows state and federal law. But his own center within the medical school runs a minorities-only fellowship that experts say is illegal. Participants in the iDiverse program must be Black, Hispanic, Native American, Pacific Islander, LGBT, or a woman, according to screenshots of a now-deleted webpage obtained by the Free Beacon. White and Asian men are excluded. So, the same guy denying all the allegations of woke racism runs a No Whites Allowed fellowship. You can't make this shit up, guys. You really can't. Just beyond parody. Now, speaking of things that are beyond parody, we've got to talk about the woke mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, a Democrat whose bonkers views on crime just got exposed. As Fox News reports, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu advocated a soft-on-crime agenda by pushing to abolish the gang registry and arguing that criminal behavior, such as theft, should not be prosecuted. Yes, seriously, she apparently believed pretty recently that stealing shouldn't be prosecuted as a crime. Prior to being elected mayor, Fox reports, Wu filled out the 2021 Boston Mayoral Candidate Questionnaire from Progressive Massachusetts, a 501c4 nonprofit organization that tracks and ranks how progressive elected officials are. According to its website, the group intends to transform Massachusetts into a bold laboratory for progressive state initiatives. In the document, Wu outlined her most progressive commitments, including her support for non-citizens voting in Boston's local elections. Interesting, but we'll set that one aside for now. The mayor was asked, "Do you support shuttering the Boston Police gang database?" And she answered yes. Then, Wu was asked whether she supported a do not prosecute list enacted by the former Suffolk County District Attorney, Rachel Rollins. Basically, the former DA had a memo outlining crimes she didn't really think should be prosecuted and wasn't planning on enforcing in most cases. DA Rollins enacted the policy memo, identifying more than a dozen charges she said should be declined for prosecution. Those crimes included shoplifting, larceny, disorderly conduct, receiving stolen property, driving with a suspended license, breaking and entering with property damage, wanton and malicious destruction of property, threats, minor in possession of alcohol, marijuana possession, possession with intent to distribute, and non-marijuana drug possession. As a candidate, Michelle Wu was asked if she agreed with this, and she did. Do you support the Suffolk County DA's office's do not prosecute list and expanded approach to dealing with such low-level offenses? Yes or no? Progressive Mass asked. Yes, Wu responded. I gotta say, guys, even for Massachusetts, even for Boston, even for Democrats, this is a new level of crazy. I'm somebody who supports modest criminal justice reform, and I actually agree with a couple things on this list. I don't think they should be prosecuting anybody for marijuana possession, for example. But the idea that you are not going to prosecute crimes of theft and stealing and property destruction is absolutely batshit insane and a total dereliction of one of the government's most basic duties and functions, which is upholding property rights. If you just let people steal, businesses literally can't operate in that environment if that becomes widespread enough, and people will lose jobs, they'll lose the stores they depend on for getting the things they need. We've already seen this play out at a small scale where stores are closing up and leaving areas with high rates of theft. If this really was enacted throughout Boston and people figured it out and started abusing these policies to just steal stuff, everything would fall apart. The social fabric, the economy, all of it relies on upholding property rights as one of the most core functions of government. What's the possible logic to not arrest people and prosecute people who steal things? I mean, even from a progressive worldview that's really interested in helping minorities and poor people, well, guess who has to pay more when people steal a lot of stuff? All the other law-abiding customers. That's right, companies regularly account for shrinkage, which is what they call theft, in their prices, and it gets passed along to all the other people in the community, many of whom are struggling to get by and are truly vulnerable and are the same kind of people that woke Democrats say they care about. But now, because they have a weird obsession with letting criminals off the hook, even when they actually have done something wrong, they're going to screw over the same people they think they're helping. I know I say this a lot, but this literally sounds like a headline in The Onion, poking fun at woke progressives, but they've literally reached that point. And guys, this is the same woke mayor who we've talked about before, who had a whole scandal because she hosted a holiday party and only invited city council members of certain races and not white ones, which, by the way, is racist.
It all started with this email sent out by a city staffer on Tuesday on behalf of Mayor Michelle Wu, inviting all city councilors to an Electeds of Color holiday party on Wednesday night. About 15 minutes later, the same staffer sending out an email apologizing for sending out the invite to all city councilors. The mayor saying the party is just intended for minority elected officials.
And it's also interesting that this progressive mayor who has a soft spot for criminals also has a weird authoritarian streak, because she's previously been criticized for making a list of her enemies and her critics and giving it to local authorities to watch out for and investigate them.
Questions swirling over a list of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu's critics emailed from her office to Boston police.
Honestly, I'm kind of lost for words about it all. This kind of thing is why I left Massachusetts and why I'm probably not going to be heading back. And if I do, it'll only be for the short term. You can't run a city like this or a state. You just can't. On one hand, I guess the people of Boston are getting what they wished for. But on the other hand, there's a lot of innocent people who don't support this insanity who will still have to suffer the consequences. What do you think, especially if you live in Massachusetts somehow and haven't left yet? Let me know in the comments below. And now we're going to talk about a fascinating Supreme Court case that was just handed down, where many liberals and progressives have ended up defending the NRA. That's right, the NRA just won big at the Supreme Court in a case that it's been litigating against the New York state government. Here's some coverage from CBS New York to help us get caught up.
U.S. Supreme Court has sided with the National Rifle Association in a case involving New York State. Thursday's unanimous ruling said the NRA's free speech rights were violated by Maria Vullo, a former state financial regulator who pushed banks and insurance companies to cut ties with the gun rights group. Now, the opinion, written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, said the NRA plausibly alleged that Vullo violated the First Amendment by coercing regulated entities to stop doing business with the NRA and punish the group.
So as you heard mentioned there, the long and short of this is that basically the New York state government went after the NRA and went around using an official department encouraging businesses not to do business with the NRA, all because the New York government, run by Democrats, disagreed with the NRA's politics and views on guns. And whether you are pro-NRA or anti-NRA, and I have my criticisms of the group to be clear, whether you're pro-gun or anti-Second Amendment or whatever your views are, nobody should support this kind of government punishment and targeting of dissident viewpoints. That's why what was so interesting to me about this case is that it came out 9-0 and all the liberal-leaning justices were on board with the NRA's rights. The opinion was even written by arguably the most progressive member of the Supreme Court, Sonia Sotomayor. And everybody from the Nonpartisan Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression to the Knight Foundation to even the very increasingly woke and increasingly left-leaning ACLU all sided with the NRA in this case. And that's because it's not really about the NRA, it's about free speech. As Justice Sotomayor's opinion noted, at the heart of the First Amendment's free speech clause is the recognition that viewpoint discrimination is uniquely harmful to a free and democratic society. The takeaway is that the First Amendment prohibits government officials from wielding their power selectively to punish or suppress speech. In this case, the ACLU quite wisely saw the danger in allowing the government to do this kind of thing, even against groups they dislike. In their statement, the ACLU said, while the ACLU stands in stark opposition to the NRA on many issues, it represented the group to safeguard the First Amendment rights of all advocacy organizations. Across the country, organizations in the fight for racial justice, criminal legal reform, reproductive and LGBTQ rights too often face attacks from state and local government officials who disagree with their point of view. If the court had allowed New York to blacklist a powerful organization like the NRA, government officials would have had even greater power to target less powerful organizations, especially those who speak for our most vulnerable communities. And I want to give the ACLU some credit here. I've criticized them a lot in the past, but in this case at least, they're being consistent and they're actually being smart. One of the issues I take with progressives is that they so often support expanding government power in ways that will obviously boomerang back at their groups and in their face, eventually in red states or when Republicans have power again. But they've actually had the foresight to see that if blue state governments can go after the NRA and try to blacklist them because they don't like their views, then red state governments can do the same thing to all the woke nonprofits that they like. We all need to be consistent on this. We either have free speech and we resist and don't allow government targeting or discrimination for speech, or we allow it and everybody ends up targeted and suppressed. I know which scenario I prefer, and it actually gives me some hope that people across the spectrum could come together on this case and say no to this kind of authoritarian tactic. Up next, new reporting reveals how the skyrocketing national debt will affect us individually, personally, and soon. The national debt is now at $34.78 trillion, which is an astonishing $103,000 per citizen and $266,000 per taxpayer. These figures often just seem abstract and nebulous, but a new report from the CBO documents how this will hurt American families. As Fox Business reports, an analysis by the nonpartisan CBO, Congressional Budget Office, found that the rising national debt will slow economic growth and suppress the growth of Americans' household income over time. So the CBO did an analysis where they look at the current debt levels, 99% debt to GDP ratio, and what would happen over the coming years if that were to stay stable. And they say that by 2054, average income per person would increase by $44,000 adjusted for inflation. But when you compare that, unfortunately quite unrealistic scenario to the baseline expectations for how much debt will go up, the income increase decreases by 12%, which amounts to more than $5,000 per person in income increases that will never happen. And when you look at an even more pessimistic scenario where debt will skyrocket, $14,500 in annual income per person will be lost. Now you might be wondering why the national debt increasing means that average incomes won't increase by as much. And the explanation is from something called the crowding out phenomenon. Basically, the more money the government has to borrow, the less money there is for private sector investment. That means there's less economic growth and new job opportunities, which leads to lower wage growth than would otherwise occur. So the reason this all matters is that it explains one of, not the only, but one of the ways that these abstract numbers about the national debt actually hurt everyday American people. So the next time you're watching the news or reading the headlines and you hear national debt crosses new threshold, don't just dismiss it as some abstract, nebulous thing. Remember, it's going to hurt the average American's income by a lot. All right, guys, I'll leave it there on that one for now. And up next, it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas going viral on the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Don't forget to subscribe and stick around if you haven't yet, and please hit that like button and comment with your thoughts as we go along. Now today, we're going to react to a now deleted TikTok that went viral from an OnlyFans creator explaining why she regrets her decision to do OnlyFans.
My mental health since I've started this has just slowly been on such a decline. I feel a little bit dead inside. I feel completely desensitized. Not to sound funny, but I really don't feel any type of desire or attraction to men in general anymore. Just know that if you are a person who's ever been interested in doing this, there really are so many downsides. At this point, and I'm willing to admit this now, there's no amount of money that you can give me right now to make me feel giving myself away in certain aspects, even if they're just a few photos or whatever online. It almost isn't worth it anymore. And while I did have such a strong start and it was so much fun in the beginning, after getting burnt out, I started to just feel really differently about the types of messages that I was getting. Seriously, if I had any type of ability to share the things that people have said, just how disgusting they are. And also when I get curious and nosy sometimes, I'll go look at their profile and they have a whole girlfriend or a whole wife. And sometimes even disgustingly enough, they have kids. It makes me feel so conflicted with doing this. When I really sit down to think about what the purpose of all this is, it's really just to visually please a bunch of men. I've been sort of exploring the idea of maybe just having my content be focused on, things that I'm actually interested in, which ultimately is not pleasing men in any way, shape, or form. Y'all can keep your money at this point.
So I wanted to talk about this video because to me, it showed a side of the conversation about OnlyFans and about the new wave of pornography that often goes underdiscussed or undercovered. I do believe in freedom, and if the person is an adult, I do think they should be allowed to make an OnlyFans, create whatever kind of explicit content they want, and sell it to people who want to buy it. I'm not somebody who supports banning that or making it illegal, and I'm never gonna be. But at the same time, I would strongly encourage anybody considering doing this to think seriously and deeply and do a lot of research about the benefits and the downsides and the actual facts involved in this. Because unfortunately, there's this depiction on the internet of all these OnlyFans girls making tons of money and what a luxurious and amazing lifestyle they end up having and flying all around the world. But that's just totally not representative of what it's actually like for most people. You're just seeing the top 1% or whatever. And while I think we should have forgiveness and empathy and space for anybody who quits this line of work, there is some aspect to it that is irreversible. To be blunt, once you show hole on the internet, you can't really undo that. And so I worry for some of these OnlyFans girls that they're going to be 10, 15 years from now massively regretting this when their sons are getting bullied on the playground by people showing butt pics of their mom to them and making fun of them. And I'm not surprised, although I do feel bad for her, that doing this kind of work has negatively affected or perhaps even hopefully temporarily destroyed her ability to relate to or connect with men. That said, I do think it's unfair to draw any sort of sweeping conclusions about men from a very skewed sample of the type of people who would sign up for an OnlyFans account, for example. And we've got to debunk the myths about OnlyFans. For example, the median earnings, the typical OnlyFans creator earns just about $180 per month, or $140 after taxes. So most of the people making this decision that's in some ways unfortunately irreversible and might haunt them are barely even going to make money off of it. They're not going to make anywhere near enough to have a career or a lifestyle or to buy themselves cars or houses or whatever you see from the top 1% of creators that go viral and become internet famous. Odds are that's probably not going to be you. And my heart goes out to the young women and also some young gay men who've been enticed by this basically false or very unrealistic and unlikely promise to go into this line of work that has serious downsides and ramifications that don't get discussed enough and then regret it. I really do feel bad for them. So I wanted to highlight this video, not to shit on this young woman in the way that many creators have, because while I think she's made some decisions that I would seriously question and wouldn't want someone I care about to make, ultimately, I don't want to see anybody in pain like this, and I'm not sure she was really well equipped with all the facts before making the decision that she made. And that's what we really need about this, is just much more awareness and information about the sometimes dark reality of OnlyFans. Like I said, when we're talking about consenting adults, I'll always support your freedom to do what you want with your body. But people should be really careful and give a lot of thought to the decisions they're making before going into this type of online work under very dubious and often false expectations and pretenses. That's just my take. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button. And now, before we wrap up today's show, I'll read a few of your comments that you left on the last episode. One person says, "I'm a white man, and I now realize I don't deserve benches or shelter from rain." Yeah, this is in reference to the woke West Hollywood mayor who talked about gendered and racialized architecture, and it just is so funny, right? Like, they have to make everything about race, as if they're just constantly emphasizing these things that make us different instead of the things that make us the same. And when it comes to architecture and infrastructure, we're all pretty much the same, at least as far as skin color or gender is concerned. Another person says, "Yo, Brad, I've been watching you for a bit now, and you're probably my favorite political commentator out of everyone I watch." Oh, thank you. "You're always fair and logical, which is refreshing with how one-sided the media is. I am a conservative, but I don't agree with everything the right says, and your moderate views provide me with more nuance that I'm able to get from just other conservatives. You also have such a great vibe in general, so keep it up." Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your viewership. And yeah, I hope that, a lot of conservatives or Republicans do follow me and like my content, and I don't agree with y'all on everything. So on different things, I might give an opinion that's not your own, and all I ask is that you hear me out and we have a respectful back and forth. Another person says, completely unrelated to the video, "Brad, your skin looks amazing." Why, thank you. I appreciate that. I have some theories that are totally unscientific, but one of them is that some people do way too much skincare. I don't do much except wash my face and moisturize. But I know some people who have like 15 different bottles and steps to their routine that they do. And I really do wonder if some of those products don't just agitate your skin more. And maybe it's just genetics and I'm just, lucky. I don't know. But sometimes less might be more when it comes to your skincare routine. Another person said, "Is this available as a podcast too? I couldn't find it on Apple Podcasts. I do enjoy your videos, but honestly, I'm more of a podcast girl. Super bummed you and Hannah won't be doing Wednesdays together." Yes, I am actively working on creating an audio podcast feed for this show. It will always be video first and YouTube first, but I do want there to be an audio feed for some people, like my boyfriend actually, who prefer to listen because they can't sit still and watch something. And as soon as that is up and running, I will make an announcement and I'll start putting it in the links in every episode. Another person says, "How do you find interesting stuff to talk about every day?" This is a good question. And when I decided to do a daily series, I was a little worried that I wouldn't be able to come up with enough stuff to talk about. But I haven't really had that problem. Basically, I use a combination of things. I use Twitter, trending topics, and my cultivated feed. I use Reddit and a bunch of different communities I'm subscribed to see what's going on with like internet drama and viral moments. I read a bunch of different news sources ranging from mainstream media sources like the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, to kind of niche libertarian sources like Reason, to right-wing media like Fox News and Fox Business that I check very frequently. And honestly, there's so much delulu going on right now in our world and so many unhinged people popping off that I don't really have that hard a time finding things to talk about. But maybe if things get better, I will. And that will be a sign of progress. All right, everybody, we'll leave it there for this episode of Brad vs. Everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out with me. Don't forget to hit that like button before you go and comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments and I want to hear from you. And with that, we'll talk again next week.